Hey everybody, welcome to the Conscious Love Show. Whether you are single, you are in a relationship, or you're healing a broken heart, this show is here to inspire you, to remind you how beautiful, lovable, and amazing you truly are, and to give you the practical tools and insights to navigate from wherever you are right now to the loving relationship that you so deeply want to have. My name is Shane Kohler. I'm a certified transformational coach and trainer with over a decade experience helping people release their trauma and open their hearts to love. I've delivered seminars all over the world, coached thousands of people through my online platforms and programs, and every week I'm coming straight to you with the hottest insights and the best teachers around, bringing you powerful resources and profound conversations to heal your relationship with love, dating, and yourself. I'm so grateful you're here, and if it's your first time, welcome. You can count on me to always show up for you with my very best and a commitment to learn and grow myself so I can serve you to my maximum ability. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got some awesome things planned for you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hey, hello again, everybody. Hello, welcome back to the Conscious Love Show podcast. Shane Kohler here, as always. Pleasure to be here, and today I am doing Shane's Diary entry number 2. So for anyone who missed entry number 1, which was about 4 weeks ago, you may want to go back and listen to it if you're listening to this one. This is a new series that I'm going to be releasing once a month on the podcast. And the idea is to create a space for me to free flow consciousness, just share what's on my heart, share what's on my mind. It's kind of like an audio journal entry where I'm letting you get a glimpse into my consciousness, my thoughts, my feelings, my process, my history, the things I've been through, the lessons I've learned. So I'm taking a break from my typical episodes where I tend to give more advice and talk about pain points and struggles that you might be having, and share a little more intimately part of my journey. And I'm really excited to include this in the podcast because I know some of you are here because you want more of that, right? Some of you are here because you want more of who am I? Who is this person delivering this podcast? And I think it's also just a little bit cathartic for me. I don't always find places where I can really share my internal world. So this is a place that I thought I could do that. So this is entry number 2. Again, if you missed entry number 1, maybe go back and listen to it, or you can just jump in here. But welcome. And really grateful you're here today. Really happy to have you with me. Today, I wanted to talk about some of my history around spirituality, religion, toxic positivity, what I'm going to call spiritual narcissism, and really the importance of embracing our shadow, or for me, the importance of embracing my shadow. And in all the work I've done, I mean, hell, I got into AA when I was 21 years old. I shared on Shane's Diary entry number 1 a few weeks ago. I shared about my journey through addiction and ultimately going to jail when I was 18 and doing a couple of years in jail. And that was like my first introduction to spirituality. It was actually really fascinating, where in 2 different dorms, because when I was in jail, I got moved around a little bit. So I'd be in a dorm for about 6 months or so, and I would connect with a group of people and, have some friendships and, a sense of belonging. And then I would, suddenly maybe in the middle of the night, someone would come in and wake me up and say, you're getting moved. And, it's just the way things happen there. And I would suddenly be dropped into a new dorm and have to find my place and my belonging all over again. And it was definitely challenging and interesting journey there, but something was fascinating. And this is why, I really feel like there's no accidents. And I look at how God or the universe or my higher consciousness or whatever it is that's operating here. But there's a design underneath it all. There's a hidden hand in the things that are happening. And in 2 different dorms, I met a group of guys that were studying different forms of spirituality. And it was really, really fascinating. And I remember just there was a book called The Secret Teachings of All Ages. I ended up buying it a few years ago. It's sitting on my bookshelf now, but it's just this massive collection of esoteric teachings that spans from all different religions and all different schools of thought and philosophies. And it's this compilation of just these really profound spiritual and esoteric teachings. And anyway, I had met a guy in one of the dorms who had this book, and me and him and a couple of other people, we were sitting around and like almost having a study group around this book and reading this together and, exploring these ideas together. And it was fascinating. I had gotten moved to a different dorm, and I was a little upset because I'd lost my group. And after a couple of weeks there, I had met this guy. He was an artist. His name was Scully. And he was an artist, and he took me up into his room to show me some of his artwork. And I peeked under his bed, and I saw the book. I said, "Is that The Secret Teachings of All Ages?" And he was like, "How do you know about that?" And I was like, holy shit. Like, I was just in this other dorm, and this guy had this book. We were all reading it. And then turns out that he and some of his, people he knew in that dorm were also sitting and having discussions on this. So it's just, a little mini miracle in my life. But I say all that to say that I was introduced to spirituality. Like, that was my introduction, right? These little study groups in jail. And it kind of got me on a path. I'll say, like, it was no accident, That was a time when I was letting go of maybe the life I had before I got there and stepping into the life I had after. And that was a kind of initiation for me. I was initiated into new ideas, new ways of thinking. That was my first introduction to yoga, which I later became a yoga teacher and spent many years practicing with a yoga master. But that was, my first introduction to yoga was in a book and that I got from one of these guys. And I would sit there and do yoga poses in my room, and I learned to meditate in jail. And it was really just a fascinating, most of the time you don't think about that's what's happening in jail. And for most people, that's not what was happening. But I found these little niche groups of people that this is why I say, like, everything is vibration, because there was something in my vibration that was attracting me to these dorms where these people were, that was attracting us to each other when we met, and that was allowing these kinds of conversations and these books and this material to be available to us. And it was fascinating. It was a fascinating experience. But I say all that to say that, I was 18, 19 years old when I first got initiated into these ideas. And then when I was 21 and I got out and I was, kind of headed down the wrong path again, so to speak. And I shared this on episode 1 or my last journal entry. I shared that I had like a spiritual awakening one night. And basically I saw my whole life play out before my eyes. And I said, like, if I don't do something radical, like I'm going to go back to jail. I'm going to end up drug addict, convict, like whatever you want to call it. But like, I saw myself going down my path, and I saw the dreams that I had, like my childhood dreams. And I saw that they were never going to happen for me. Here I am, 15 years later, and all my dreams have happened. So it's been really interesting from the moment I had that kind of epiphany, spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it, and the steps I've taken since, and to move myself from one path to the other. But I say all this to say that I have a long history with spirituality and being in spiritual circles. And what I want to talk about today is spiritual narcissism, toxic positivity, the repression of our shadows, which is maybe one of the most devastating things. And I think, this happens in New Age spirituality. It happens in like traditional Christianity. I mean, it probably happens in every religion, every walk of life, is this idea of toxic positivity, this idea of repression of the shadow, and the unwillingness to let ourselves have all of our experience, to let ourselves be available to 100% of who we are. There's this internal fragmentation where we determine that parts of ourselves are good and right and acceptable, and parts of ourselves are bad and wrong and unacceptable. And we end up exiling these parts of ourselves in favor of the ones that are, quote, more acceptable or more lovable or more worthy or more good. And it's devastating to the soul when we do that. It's devastating to our authenticity. And it's devastating to really living a full, real human life. And today I want to share a little bit about my journey with this and how I've learned to really embrace my shadow and how that's looked in my life and what that's meant for me. Because it's been a journey. It's been a journey. And I'd say authenticity has always been one of my deepest values. It was always really important for me to be real and be authentic. But I don't even think I knew what authenticity was for so many years because I was so busy trying to be who I thought I was supposed to be. And so I want to dive into all of this today. But if you were with me on Shane's Diary episode 1 or entry number 1, I talked a little bit about my history with my mother. And I also talked a little bit about my history with my father, but I'll just catch you up if you didn't hear that, where my mother was, very religious, I'd say like extreme religion, like unhealthy extreme religion. And I think religion can be very healthy for a lot of people. It can give us a lot of really wonderful benefits in our life. But my mother was unhealthy, extreme religious. Even to this day, she is. And there's right now a rift between myself and my mother because I'll just put it this way. She's allowed abuse to take place with my younger sisters and has justified it under the guise of her religion, right? So it's like this kind of distorted, warped view, and she relies on her religion for justification. And me growing up, I was subjected, essentially born into this religious structure that she created for me. And from a very, very young age, there was this underlying tone. And, my mom was a great mother in so many ways. She was very loving. She was very supportive. She took me to Taekwondo, took me to my basketball games, really, if she thought it was good, she would do anything in her power to make it available to me. And there were some very good things that she worked very hard to make available to me. And I don't want to take that away from her. She was a good mother in many, many ways. But she had this big blind spot when it came to her religion. And I remember from a very, very young age, I was getting these subtle messages that basically in so many different ways were in having me internalize the idea that I wasn't lovable by God. I'll just put it that way. And it's not that she ever spoke those words, but it's that the way that she spoke to me and the way that she dealt with who I was as an individual constantly gave this underlying impression that I was not lovable by God. And a lot of religion does this. There's this idea that we are inherently evil sinners, and that a part of us is not lovable or is not worthy or is not acceptable. And that's the part of us that we try to exile. And, like I said, religion can do a lot of wonderful things for a lot of people, but any philosophy that has you believe that you are a bad sinner, fundamentally, that's who you are, is destructive to your psyche. I'm going to say that. And I stand behind that 100%. And this is what I'm talking about, where the part of us that we say is not lovable, is not worthy, that's the shadow part of ourselves. In this social world that we've created, the social dynamic that we live in, there are certain things that we say good people do this and bad people do that. And whenever there's a part of us that doesn't operate within the parameters of what we think good people are, we hide it. We withhold it. And that's when we end up exiling a part of ourselves, and that is destructive to the psyche. And so my mom raised me, and I'll give a couple of examples here, just maybe you can get the idea of what I'm getting at here. I remember Power Rangers were big when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, and I really liked Power Rangers. My mom thought Power Rangers were evil. Batman. Right? I love Batman. I thought Batman was so cool. My mom thought Batman was evil. Dragon Ball Z, right? Normal things that so many kids are into. All my friends were into it. These were the most popular shows on TV. And, I remember my grandma McDonald's was doing like the Power Ranger toy promotion, and my grandma went to McDonald's and she got me every single one of the toys. And I had all the action figures, but my mom wouldn't let me watch the show. And there was this subtle conditioning, and it wasn't just one event, but it was that this happened over and over and over and over and over again. There was a shaming about everything I liked, everything I was interested in. I remember I was like 12 or 13, and I don't know, it was like a health magazine or something, but you know, I'm like a preteen boy. And of course I've got my hormones and I'm growing up, and this was a part of myself that my mom refused to acknowledge even existed. Never once had an intelligent conversation with me about my sexual development or anything like that. But I picked up this magazine that had a girl in a bikini on the front cover. And my mom comes up and like, "What are you reading?" And she's like, "Oh, of course it has some naked woman on the front." And like just her whole tone and attitude about it, like completely shamed me for something that was normal. I mean, actually healthy. I mean, you know, maybe at 12 years old, I need a little guidance around that, right? Like, but I mean, this is my biological development. Like, it's healthy. Of course I'm going to be interested in a girl in a bikini. But that was one chip among constant chips, from Power Rangers to Dragon Ball Z to the music I liked to listen to the fact that I was attracted to the female form. There were these constant chips that something about me was wrong. And that I was unlovable, essentially, by God, because every time she wrapped it back to that, she made it about religion. And it was always, why don't you want to watch more church movies? Why don't you want to read more scripture? I'm like, I don't know, because I'm a child. Because these things are exciting. These things are fun, right? But there was just who I was fundamentally was somehow wrong. And this was constantly reinforced every chance throughout my childhood. My mom did a lot of good things. I don't want to take away from the good things she did. But there was a lot of harm done there too, in terms of how I saw myself and thought about myself and felt about myself. And eventually I started to act out a lot. I ended up getting expelled from school in the 7th grade because I was getting into a lot of fights, and I was basically getting sent to the office every single day for acting out in class and things like that. But what had happened was my authenticity, the truth of who I am, had been so completely stifled, like suffocated every day of my life, that I was starting to act out. And the more I started to act out, the more my mom thought I was some kind of devil child. She never realized that it was actually the suffocating stifling of the human that I was and the human that I was becoming that was causing me to act out. To this day, I don't think she's ever connected those dots. And I ended up getting expelled from school, and this, among many other things that had happened, I think my mom got to a point where she just felt like she couldn't deal with me anymore. I think I scared her, honestly. And she ended up sending me to live with my dad. Now, I had never met my dad. And if there was an exact opposite from my mom, it was my dad, and not necessarily in a healthy way. My dad was an alcoholic, drug user, liked rock and roll. He was a tattoo artist. He was, I think I shared this on the last episode, that I'm pretty sure he was, a narcissist in many ways. And this was my dad, right? And I was sent to live with him. So overnight, I went from one environment to the other. An environment of completely repressed shadow to an environment of completely uninhibited shadow. Full expression of the shadow among my dad, among his friends. Now, this is the thing about the shadow. It's not that we want to give full unrestricted expression to our shadow. Like, there are things that are destructive, right? Like, we don't want to all go become serial killers, right? Like there are truly things that are destructive. the irony is that it's the shame that we carry around the shadow that makes it destructive. And so going from my mother's house, where it was so much shame and suffocation and stifling and control, to my dad, where there were kind of like no rules. I mean, my dad was a psycho in his own sense, because he would, there were no rules until I broke one that didn't exist. And then I was getting screamed at, and, he'd come into my room and throw my stereo against the wall. So like there was, there's the opposite unhealthy extreme. But when I was given the opportunity, you see, my mom had subtly reinforced the idea my entire childhood that I was bad. And because that was the subtle idea that was reinforced in me my entire childhood, I just started to believe that's who I am. I'm bad. Maybe that means I'm going to go to hell, right? But whatever it means, I'm just going to be it, because I clearly can't be good. And when I was sent to live with my dad, I was basically given full permission to be my bad self. And so I did. And that's where so many of the things I talked about, drugs and just, a whole certain kind of lifestyle, that ultimately landed me in jail at 18 years old. And what I want to say here is the guidance that I didn't have from either of my parents was what to do with these parts of myself. My mom taught me to repress them. My father taught me to revel in them, but I was never taught how to have a healthy relationship with them. And that's something I actually didn't learn until I was in my 30s. So when I got out of jail, I figured out pretty quickly that I had to get sober. And that was a literal matter of survival. I was on probation, like I was being drug tested. Like if I didn't figure out how to get and stay sober, I was going to go back to jail, and I did not want that. And so I did it. I went to an AA meeting. I asked someone to sponsor me. I worked the steps. I threw myself into it 100%, like my life depended on it, because it did. And I got sober. And I got into transformational work, and that's ultimately where my career path started. I got into a large seminar training community where I ultimately became one of the trainers. I spent many years traveling around the country delivering these seminars. That's where I got my formal education. I worked with some of the masters of this work for about 6 to 8 years in total. And it was a huge point of growth for me in so many ways. But through AA, which AA maybe of all the things I was involved in, maybe had the healthiest relationship with the shadow, right? But these other communities that I got involved in A Course in Miracles community, which I often say that A Course in Miracles is like my Bible. And maybe one of these days I'll do an episode specifically about A Course in Miracles, just to kind of share some of the deeper insights of it, because it's been the most transformational thing I've ever found. It really has helped me to understand life in a way that is truly resonant for me and gives me a spiritual foundation that I feel like I can actually stand on. It's answered all my spiritual questions. I'll put it that way. And maybe I'll, again, one day do an episode where I dive a little deeper into it. But I got into A Course in Miracles communities. And while the Course itself, I think, is perhaps one of the most profound spiritual teachings in the world, often the communities that grow up around it are full of spiritual narcissism, as so many spiritual communities are. I got into a Native American church. I got into learning and facilitating breath work. As I said, I did these large seminar trainings. I worked for many years with a yoga master. I did multiple teacher trainings with him. I started teaching yoga. I dove deep into yoga philosophy. I've read probably, aside from the Quran, which I've read pieces of, but I've read most other spiritual texts. I've read the Nag Hammadi scriptures. I've read the Bible front to back. I've read the Buddhist scriptures. I've read the yogic text, the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras. I mean, I've extensively studied all of this. Course in Miracles, digested that front to back. And through all of this, I didn't find much guidance on what to do with the shadow. You know, A Course in Miracles touches on the idea of guilt a lot. And it says that we should never feel guilty for anything. And I know that can be a scary statement, right? Because a lot of times we think guilt is what keeps people in check. Well, guilt is related to shame, which is related to repression. And guilt keeps people in check, but it also stifles their truth and their authenticity. And so the idea is that when we truly release guilt and we truly release shame and we have the ability to be with all of ourselves, we are naturally going to choose right, which means we're going to choose, to put it simply, we're going to choose love. Because love is really what we're made of. Love is really what we are at the core. But it's when there are these other parts of ourselves that become disintegrated, meaning we're not integrating them. We're exiling them. We're detaching from them. We're calling them evil. We're calling them wrong. We're disconnecting from these parts of ourselves. We end up repressing them, which lead to projection. And then, if there's this whole part of ourselves that we've exiled, that we haven't given room to exist and room to be valid. This could be our anger. It could be our hatred. It could be our fear. It could be our shame, the things that we think are wrong with us. But it's all the quote bad stuff, right? All the things that people call bad, all the things that they say we shouldn't be. Well, they end up coming out sideways. They come out as mental illness. They come out as dysregulated nervous systems. They come out as hatred and projection in our relationships. They come out as victimization and martyrdom. They come out in, any negative expression you can imagine. Just look at the state of our world. Look at the state of our politics. Look at the state of the kinds of things we do in war. And people might argue with me here, but I'm pretty confident when I say this, that all of the lack of peace that we see in the world is really the result of repressed shadow. People who have not integrated their shadow need to project it. And so the way this works psychologically is when I believe that there is evil within myself, and I don't want to acknowledge that. I don't want to face that. So subconsciously, I believe there's evil within myself. I feel guilty about that. And there's an immense amount of guilt and shame I hold around this part of me that is not good, that is not okay. But I don't want to deal with that. So then what happens is, in order to escape the presence of that quote evil, I project it outward. And I say there's a bad guy out there somewhere, and they're to blame for all the problems and whatever it is. You look at how some political leaders come into power. What do? They create a common enemy. They blame, let's say, immigrants, right? Immigrants are causing all the problems. And then they get a whole bunch of people who also are carrying this repressed shadow to project that same feeling onto that same common enemy, and they align people behind them against a common enemy, and that's how they garner support. We've seen this happen recently. And from the macro to the micro, from the way that we sit in our little group of friends and gossip and judge and criticize other people, to the way that we blame another country for the world's problems and commit genocide on them, like Hitler did. It's the same psychological dynamic. It's a repressed shadow that has become disintegrated, and we need to project it onto someone or something else to try to feel like we can escape it, but we can't really escape it. In the last billions of years of human history, why haven't we found world peace yet? Why can't we just mutually agree to stop killing each other? Whatever the problem is in the world, let's just agree that we're not going to kill each other to deal with it, right? That sounds pretty simple. Why can't we do that? because we haven't found peace within ourselves. We're still warring with parts of ourselves, and whatever is happening internally is going to happen externally. And so we end up warring in our relationships. We end up warring with our friends, with our family. And on the macro scale, we go to war with other countries. Wipe out complete nations of people. This is how it works. And so I think maybe my biggest lesson in all the work I've done, all the spiritual teachings I've explored, everything I've learned, every community I've been in, like what I have learned, the most valuable thing I have learned was how to embrace my own shadow. How to embrace the parts of myself that I believed were evil. And when I got sober, as a matter of survival, like I didn't have the coaching, the support, the clarity, the awareness, the spiritual maturity. I didn't have any of that. So the only thing I could do was disown parts of myself. And maybe I needed to do that at that time because I needed to survive. And I didn't know that my past was a disintegrated shadow, a lack of guidance, a not knowing how to be with certain parts of myself. All I knew was that drugs were bad and I had made a lot of mistakes in my past and I had been a quote bad guy and I needed to fix myself. And so what did I do? I became really good. When I was in AA, I sponsored probably over 100 people in the few years that I was in AA. I went through the steps. I remember in AA, for those of you who don't know, there's something called the fourth and the fifth step, where the fourth step is where you take a moral inventory. And then the fifth step is where you review that moral inventory with someone, usually your sponsor. And basically it's kind of like identifying everything that's not okay about me, all my resentments, all my fears. And then I don't know that this is 100% how it is for everyone, but how I felt about it at the time was I was trying to get rid of these parts of myself. Again, trying to get rid of something that's a part of me, saying some part of me is bad and I got to get rid of it. And I remember most people do 1, 4th, and 5th step and they're done with it. I did 8 of them. I just kept asking my sponsor, can we do another one? Can we do another one? I so badly wanted to get rid of these parts of myself. And then after a few years in AA, and like I said, I sponsored 100 people or more. And I'm not joking when I say that. I sponsored so many people. I was trying to be so good. I was trying to do the right thing. I was trying to be the good guy. And that's what they tell you to do. They tell you go through your steps and then sponsor other people. So that's what I did. And, I feel bad for the people who I was sponsoring, and hopefully I helped some of them. I'm sure I did, despite myself. But I feel bad for those people because, I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for me. I was doing it so I could be so good. And that's selfish. In AA, they say that, selfishness and self-centeredness is our problem. And because I hadn't learned to be with my selfishness, because I hadn't learned to integrate that selfishness and give a space in my soul where I could hold and nurture that part of myself, I just dressed it up in new clothes. And I've never considered myself a narcissist. I've always thought I had a good level of empathy. I've always been a relatively empathetic person. But what I'm describing there, that is spiritual narcissism. Where my spiritual path becomes another mask for my ego. And this is something I encountered, looking back on all these people that I thought were so holy and leaders, probably all of them at one point or another have become a disappointment to me. All the teachers I found, all the leaders I found. And I think it's because in the spiritual world, and it's not just in New Age, it's in religion, but this idea of spiritual narcissism, it's like an epidemic where people put on these spiritual clothes and become holier than thou. And now they're better and they're more enlightened and they're more conscious. And they look down on people and say, oh, I'm sorry, you just don't have the clarity yet. That's fucking spiritual narcissism. It's when your spirituality becomes another act for your ego to play, and it's actually not spiritual at all. But we think these people are spiritual because they talk the talk and they wear the clothes and they have the way about them. And it's gotten to the point now, and like I've spent so much time in so many different spiritual circles, and I've made some wonderful friends, and there are beautiful, beautiful people in these places. I'm not condemning them as a whole. But it's gotten to the point where the whole spiritual look now just makes me sick. Because I'm like, nobody's really like that. Nobody's really like, oh, I'm floating on air and it's all like, nobody's fucking like that. That's not human. That's not real. That's an act people put on to feel superior. And there's actually a lack of humility. And the reason people put on that act is because they can't be with the parts of themselves that are not like that. And I was like that for a period of time. I may be honestly, like, I'm not trying to, be righteous here. This is just an honest self-appraisal. I don't think I took it to the degree that a lot of people do. But there was a part of me that had to be high vibe all the time. And if you were low vibe, or if you were experiencing a lower state, I looked at you and said, you're just not there yet. You just don't understand. And maybe in my own way, I was empathetic to that, but that wasn't holy. That wasn't kind. That was me bypassing the human experience because I didn't have the capacity to own that within myself. And again, for me, it was a matter of survival. And because coming from where I came from and then needing to get my life together, I had to shut down those parts of myself just to survive, just to get sober. And then I got to a point where I was too spiritual for AA. I got into these transformation communities. I became one of the leaders in the community. At one point I was running a coaching program that had thousands of students, and I was the coordinator. So I ran the entire program, and we probably had 10,000 students total. And, I was busy and I was doing a lot of work in that community. And then I became a trainer and I was delivering these seminars and I got a lot of status in spiritual communities, in conscious communities, in personal development communities. And I thought that I had it all together. I thought that I had arrived, and I was being so good. I was being so good. I just cut out all the bad parts of myself. I only listened to spiritual music. I just, I only said nice things about people. It all sounds really good, right? Really pure. And a couple things broke me. And like, I look back and I say, thank God I went to jail when I did, because it literally saved my life. And, COVID happened, and that changed things for me. My wife was diagnosed with cancer, and that changed things for me. And so I went through this dark night of the soul. I think it started with COVID, and my wife's cancer took it to a whole other level. But, I moved in with my wife right before COVID happened, and I was still a trainer. I was delivering these seminars. So I was living with her, but I was gone a lot of the time because I was traveling and I was delivering seminars. And then COVID hit. The company I was working for shut down because you couldn't have seminars during COVID, and they couldn't keep the doors open without running seminars. So the company literally went bankrupt, and I lost my job. And here I was, I had just moved into my then fiance's house. I was jobless. I, like everything I had spent the last decade working for, I lost it in an instant. And it was very humbling. I had a small coaching company at the time. I had a handful of clients and I was working to grow my client base, but I wasn't anywhere near where I am now. And here I am, jobless, living in my fiance's house. COVID hit, on lockdown. You know, there were relationship things that were happening because we had went from being long distance and living in separate parts of the country to living in the same 1,200 square foot townhouse and stepping on each other's toes. And like, we hadn't even learned how to live together yet. Now we're in lockdown together. It was intense. And there were some good times during then too. We ended up eloping to Montana during COVID, and we got married there because our wedding got canceled. So our wedding was literally April of 2020. It was scheduled for April 17th, 2020. And we were going to get married in Aruba. We were going to get married in the same place I proposed. And then the Aruba shut down as a country, and it's like nobody's coming in or out. And so we couldn't go to Aruba. So our wedding was canceled. And then we ended up eloping to Montana with a handful of friends and having our wedding there in the middle of the pandemic. And it was beautiful. And we got married. And I'd say our first year of marriage was really good. And it was literally the weekend of our anniversary. I think it was the Monday after. So our anniversary was on a weekend. I think it was on a Saturday. It was in July. And we celebrated our anniversary, and we had a really good first year. We'd gotten through COVID and lockdown and, you know, the new part of living together. We had a really good first year. And then my wife, I think it was the Monday or the Tuesday after our anniversary. She went in for a routine checkup and she's diagnosed with breast cancer. She ended up going through chemotherapy, some other treatments, surgery. It was all in all like a year of just her battling cancer, and then a couple more years after that of her healing afterwards. And, you know, I wish there had been a better way that this could have happened, but it happened the way it happened. And it broke something open inside of me, where all the parts of myself that I had repressed just came out. And I did my best to temper it. That's when I got into therapy. I hired a really good therapist, and I worked with him for, I think, 3 years. And, you know, I really did a lot of work on this. But anger, rage, resentment, just pain and guilt and shame and like all these things that I just had never dealt with before, they were all coming to the surface all at once. And I didn't really know what to do with it. And, you know, this is maybe one of my biggest regrets in my whole life, was like, I was there for my wife when she went through her treatments. I drove her to every single treatment. I picked her up. I cooked. I was there for her, practically speaking, but emotionally I wasn't there for her in the way that I could have been. And that's probably my biggest regret in my whole life. And the reason was because there was stuff coming up that I didn't know how to deal with, that I had never integrated. And so I couldn't be there any more than I was. And I started smoking weed again during that time. You know, I thought it was something that was helping with my anxiety. It actually made my anxiety worse. I ended up smoking weed pretty chronically for almost 3 years. And this is after, I don't know, 10 years sober, something like that. 8 years, I don't remember exactly, but after many, many years sober, I started smoking weed again. And I thought it was helping me deal with the stress and the anxiety of the situation. And who knows, maybe in some ways it was, but it was chronically over time, it ended up making my anxiety much worse, to the point where my wife got through cancer. She had healed and our life had moved on, but I hadn't moved on. because the marijuana was keeping me trapped. And this is a really great example of, again, like I don't judge myself for it, because I couldn't have known. Like when I got sober out of survival. And I did the best I could. And God knows I worked my ass off to get sober and to stay sober. And I tried to do the right thing as much as I knew how at the time. But I exiled the pothead in me. I said he was bad. He was wrong. He was a part of myself that is not good and not acceptable. And there was no love in my heart for that part of myself. Even when I ended up leaving AA, and I ended up leaving AA because I thought I had outgrown it, but I remember like there was a feeling where I felt ashamed of being an addict. I didn't want my life to be defined by that anymore. I was leading seminars. I was running this coaching program. I was doing all these things. And like, I didn't want my life to be defined by addiction. I said, that was part of my past. That's not who I am. I thought I could actually erase my past. But it was all there. And then when shit hit the fan, what did I turn to? That one thing that had always brought me comfort when I was younger. Marijuana. And my wife went through her treatment. She got better. She healed. But I didn't heal. I had to get to a very, very low point where we were having problems in our relationship. I was having so much anxiety on a daily basis that like my wife would tell me like, you were just like bristling. Like I would just walk into a room and like I wouldn't know what to do because there was just this palpable energy about you. And she thought I was angry, and it wasn't that I was angry. It was that I was so uncomfortable in my body because the 3 years of using marijuana had completely dysregulated my system. And it was getting to the point where I couldn't even really function at work. My business was starting to decline. And I think it's important to say too, I just want to put this out there because the marijuana that's available today is not the marijuana that, I was smoking when I was 13. It is, I didn't realize this at the time, and I was a little naive. I was like, I smoked weed all as a teenager, which wasn't good, and I wouldn't recommend it. But the stuff that's available from the dispensaries today it's like a real drug. It's not just weed the way people talk about. It is a real hard drug that will fuck up your brain and your body. It will completely dysregulate your system if you use it with any amount of regularity. I learned that firsthand. And when I came off of it, I finally got honest with my wife. I was like, I have to quit this. She knew I used it, but I don't think she understood the extent to which I had been using it. And she supported me through that. And it was one of the hardest things I ever did. It was probably 6 months of feeling awful, like several weeks of withdrawal. Like I was coming off of a real drug. I mean, I came off of like heroin when I went to jail. It was, not as bad as that to the degree that like I wasn't vomiting all over the place, but it was bad. It was real withdrawals, insomnia. It was awful. But this is maybe the most important point I want to say here. The reason that had to happen that way, and this is what I learned from it, I had exiled the addict in me, that part of myself. I had said they were bad, they were wrong. They weren't acceptable. They weren't allowed to exist. There was never a part of me that was able to nurture that part of myself. And so when shit got hard, when shit hit the fan, that's the part of me that came out. The gift in that, and sometimes things don't happen in the best possible way, but they happen the way they happen and couldn't have happened any other way, right? So the gift in it was that in giving myself 3 years to indulge the addict in me, I was able to learn firsthand that I don't want that. And that's sometimes what we're not willing to go through. We exile the shadow parts of ourselves because we think they're bad and they're wrong. And we never give ourselves the opportunity to learn who we truly want to be by our own choice. When I decided to quit marijuana, I decided that I don't want to live like this. I don't want to feel like this. I don't want to have this addiction. I don't want to live in a dysregulated system like this. I don't want to have this crutch that I'm leaning on to feel good. I don't want to always be fighting. Should I not? I want to be free. I made a conscious choice to be free, not from guilt, not from shame, not because I was exiling part of myself. I did it because it's what I wanted to do. And today, I love the addict in me. I nurture that part of myself. And you see, the addict in me, and I'm saying the addict in me, but it could be the addict in you. It could be the anger in you. It could be the guilt in you, the shame, the fear, like whatever it is. But see, here's the thing. The addict in me is not just an addict. It's the part of me that's afraid. It's the part of me that felt like it never belonged. It's the part of me that wants to escape. It's the part of me that feels like life is too heavy. It's the part of me that wants to live in a dream world. It's also the creative part of me. It's also the rebellious part of me. It's the part of me that wants to buck the system and speak out against injustice. And that part that manifests as addict is so much more than the judgmental label that we put on it. It's this whole amalgamation of complex thoughts and complex feelings that when they're not integrated properly, they come out sideways like addiction. And what I learned through that journey was, I don't want to live with this crutch. I don't want to live addicted. But you know what? This part of me is allowed to exist. And what that's led to is deeper insight, deeper empathy, deeper compassion, deeper love for myself, deeper love for others. One of the biggest things that I think is transformational, the Inspired Love program that I created was really in tandem with this whole journey I've been describing today. The journey of learning to embrace my own shadow. And something that we do in the program is we deal with shame directly. We do a lot of work around shame. Because it's not ever that I was an addict that was a problem. It's the shame that I had around being an addict that caused me to deny that part of myself, that caused me to push away that part of myself, that became like a dead weight that I was carrying in my life. One of the most important things we do in the program is we face the parts of ourselves that we're ashamed of. And we find freedom. One of the biggest additions that I made to my work that's made it so much deeper and so much more powerful and transformative for people was, instead of what I used to teach people, and I taught this to others because it's what I was teaching myself, here's how we should be. Let's try to be how we should be. Let's be high vibe. Let's be creative. Let's be passionate. There's a place for that. I'm not saying that's always wrong. But what's made my work so much deeper and what's allowed me to really help so many more people, to truly help, is to not say, this is who we should be, let's try to be that, but to say, this is who we are. And let's love all of it first. Let's embrace all of who we are first. the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. Let's embrace the anger. Let's embrace the hate. Let's embrace the light. Let's embrace the love, right? But it's not this toxic positivity where we pretend that we're all good when there's a war raging inside of us. And then that becomes spiritual narcissism because we don't have the ability to be with the unsavory parts of ourselves. Therefore, we can't hold space for the unsavory parts of anyone else. Then we become righteous and we become superior and we become judgmental. And then people don't feel safe with us. And if you're a healer and you're operating from this place, and I got to say, like, I just, it's not everybody. There are some really great healers out there. But I look at a lot of the people on Instagram, a lot of the coaches and people that are out there, and they're preaching from like this mountaintop, this idealized standard of perfection. And they might attract a lot of attention because they're reinforcing the same shame that so many people feel inside of themselves. And so people resonate with that because they're like, if you can tell me how to really get rid of these parts of myself, I'm going to trust you. But it ends up being more damaging because it's just a perpetuation of the same shame. And this is what I've noticed is, like, when I see people get stuck in repetitive patterns for years and years and years, it's not because they're not good enough. It's because they're trying to be too good. They're trying to be too perfect. And they're exiling parts of themselves, and those parts that are exiled become like dead weight on our soul. And the most amazing thing happens when we love all of ourselves. We heal the war inside. You see, I didn't heal my addiction. And this is the scary part because people don't want to face their shadow. And this is what I did. And like, look, it was hard, right? Caused some problems in my relationship, caused some problems in my business. I went through some rocky times because of it. Not my proudest moments for sure. But you know what? My business is stronger than ever. My relationship is stronger than ever. So like, yeah, there were some bumps in the roads, but it all worked out better because I'm more wholly myself now. And I didn't conquer my addiction by stifling it. That's what I did when I was 21 and I had to get sober to save my life. And that was the only way I could have done it back then. I didn't have the time or the space or the guidance to do it any other way. I just had to do what I had to do to survive. But when I really overcame my addiction when I was older, I didn't do it by stifling it. I did it by letting it exist until I was clear that it was something I did not want. That's how we integrate our shadow. We give ourselves permission to be who we are in that moment and to love all of it. Now, obviously, I'm not condoning any kind of violence or destructive behavior. And, you know, like, we've all got to find responsible ways of handling ourselves. But you can handle the emotional reality of whatever's real and receive it in love and nurture yourself through it. And yeah, you might go through some bumps in the road. But eventually you'll figure out who you're going to be, who you want to be, who you choose to be. And this is the thing. When there's no guilt and shame obstructing the truth of who we are, we fundamentally always return to the point of, I want to choose love. Because it's what I am. My guilt, my shame, my fear, the internalized judgment from my society and my culture and my parents and my boyfriend and my girlfriend and, like, you know, all of the internalized judgment that I've accumulated throughout my life has settled within me as shame. And now that shame shows up as addiction, or that shame shows up as anger or hatred or guilt or sadness or unworthiness. But that's not who I am. That's a part of myself that has been distorted by my trauma. And here's the thing, no matter how good you try to be, you can't get rid of that part. It will always be there. And in your moment of weakness, it'll rear its head. And you'll say, I did so much work. Why am I acting like this again? Because you didn't do the work that you thought you did. Imagine it like this. Imagine there's a little child in your heart. And that child is everything that you hate about yourself. And they've been told that they're not good enough, and they're not attractive enough, and they're not lovable, and they're weak, and they're pathetic, and they're needy, and they're all these things. I mean, wouldn't that child just want to go have a drink or a drug just to quiet the noise for a little bit so it can just feel okay for a minute? What that child needs is not to be locked up in a closet and never looked at or spoken to. What that child needs is to be held, to be reassured, to be told that there was never anything wrong with it to begin with. It was all a lie. Yeah, something happened, you got broken up with, you got rejected, your parents beat you, you got shamed for the way you look, or, things happen throughout your life and you internalize those things. But they were never true. It was never who you are. But you believed it was, and that's what scared you. And because you believed that that's who you were and you didn't want to be that, you tried to exile that part of yourself. And now that becomes the dead weight. Right? Going back to the idea of like high vibes only. Yeah, you know what? We do want to live high vibes only, but we don't want it to be artificial. We want it to be real. When you love all of yourself, you also love all of everyone and everything else because you're not projecting anymore. Remember what I said earlier about projection? Whatever I'm not willing to deal with within myself, whatever conflict is within me gets projected outward, and it becomes conflict in my relationships, conflict in my family, conflict in the world. When you love all of yourself, there's nothing to project, and so you love everyone and everything else too. You might say, I don't agree with everything. You might say, there are things I would stand up and say no to. But it's not a reason to withdraw love. And I'd like to challenge, if you made it this far in the episode, I'd like to challenge everybody. Look at everything you get angry at. Look at everything that you feel some kind of energy towards. Look at everything you judge, everything you criticize. Even if it's something that seems so obvious, like one of our political leaders, or something bad that's happening in the world. And start to ask yourself, what part of myself am I not willing to be with here? Because the way we become high vibes only, and it's not toxic, is by love being the only thing that exists in us anymore. Right? If I love all of myself, I love everyone and everything else, now I'm high vibes only. Now I know some people might say, you can't just love everyone and everything. There are horrible things happening in the world. They're not okay. I'm not disagreeing with that. But even with those things, this would be a whole other conversation we could dive into on this topic. But even with all those horrible things that are happening in the world, what if you approached them from a loving perspective rather than a hateful perspective? What if you could purely approach those things from a sincere desire to bring about the highest good for you and everyone involved, rather than an anger or a hatred or a resentment against it, because you need to make it wrong to justify something inside yourself that doesn't feel okay. This is the highest spiritual practice, what I'm talking about today. And there are a lot of people in all kinds of spiritual circles with talking all kinds of language and doing all kinds of ceremonies that haven't even begun to touch this. Because this isn't a trend. This isn't a brand. It's not some costume that I can put on my ego and dress it up to make it look holy. This is actually the disillusion of the ego, which is a whole different ballgame. I want to end with this last idea. When love is the only thing you carry, it's the only thing that'll show up around you. And so, if you want a loving relationship, it'll show up. Friendships, connection, career. Your whole life will become an exchange of giving and receiving love. Because that's all you have to give. That's all you put out. What you put out comes back to you. You see, it really is an inside-out game. It really is an inside-out game. We go about trying to change things in the world thinking that if I meet the right person, if I get the right relationship, if I work hard enough, if I get enough money, I get enough success and accolades and approval, if I fix this person in my family, if I change these conditions at work, if I change enough of the external world, I'll finally feel okay inside. As long as there's a part of yourself, a little dark corner of your consciousness, of your soul, that you're not integrating, that you're not receiving and holding in love, that's going to be reflected in the world around you. Whatever conflict you have in your life now, I say this with love. There's no judgment here. Maybe 10 years ago, this would have been a judgmental statement. It's not now. Whatever conflict you have in your life is there because it's reflecting an unresolved conflict that you have in your own heart. It's there not so you can go to war with the external situation and try to fix it and change it and make it right. It's there to remind you to look at what is conflicted within yourself. And as you step by step embrace every single one of these things, man, I wish I could just keep going. I'm getting to time now. I'm going to wrap it up, but like so many examples, how I've done this with money, how I've done this with relationships, how I've done this, as I shared, with my addiction, with my parents, like just, it's been like throughout my life, just step by step, bringing love to everything I hated. And how the world has transformed around me to reflect. And when there's a conflict in myself, you believe it. It shows up in my relationship and with a client, when there's a conflict in myself, it'll show up. It's law. Last thing I want to say is I've talked a lot about this today, and what I've been touching on is really the essence of the work we do in the Inspired Love program. Right? I'm not here to tell you how to go find the perfect person who's going to make you feel better about yourself. I'm here to help guide you on a path that you love yourself so completely that there is no conflict inside, and then your external world can people itself with reflections of love. That you can love so wholly within yourself that your relationships with others become holy. That's what the Inspired Love program is. It's a community where we get together and we walk this path together. If you're touched by this, if this message has resonated something in you, if you can feel that the weight of that conflict in your soul, and you're tired of it and you're exhausted of it, and you want some guidance, a perspective, a community of support where we can sit down and we can walk that path with you, that's what we're here for. We're not about, sitting around in ceremonial circles and beating drums and, taking acid together. I mean, if you want to do that, sure, it's a great time, go for it. But we're doing the most spiritual work on the planet, and it doesn't even look spiritual because we're not dressing it up in a way that looks pretty to the ego. We're just dealing with the real work of loving ourselves completely, of integrating the shadow, of integrating those inner exiles so that we can love ourselves wholly and that our relationships become holy. So I want to make that invitation. If you'd like to take that step, if you'd like to join us and be a part of this amazing supportive community and do this work with us, I'm going to leave the link to learn more in the show notes below wherever you're listening to this. Thank you for being with me today. I'm excited, like I said earlier, to have these journal entries as a part of the podcast and share a little more of my story and my personal insights and things. And it's fun. It's exciting. And it's something that I hope is resonant and valuable for the listeners. So if you listened, if you made it this far into the show, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to hear my story. And love and blessings to all of you. Thank you for being here with me. I'll be back with you next week. Take care. Hope you have a great one. Bye. Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @TheLivingRelationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.